Hey everyone, welcome to Travel Tuesday, part of the Beard Bros Media Network at the intersection of culture and industry. I'm your host, Brian Applegarth, creator of the Cannabis Trail and founder and owner of Applegarth Strategies, an agency specialized in the cannabis travel audience and visitor economy strategies. Whether you're a seasoned cannabis professional or just starting out, you're here to find something of value here on Travel Tuesday. You're sure to find something of value on Travel Tuesday and the Beard Bros Media Network. So let's get started. For this Travel Tuesday podcast episode, I'm interviewing Alex Rogers, the CEO, Executive Producer of ICBC. Alex is the founder of several ancillary cannabis businesses, cutting his teeth as an activist in the early 90s under the tutelage of Jack Herrera. Alex has a deep proprietary knowledge of the emerging global cannabis and hemp industry. He has played a key role in professionalizing and mainstreaming the industry, building one of the United States' most popular medical cannabis clinics and the first ever event to advertise medical cannabis on network TV in the US. Big milestone. Living in 5 different countries throughout his life and able to communicate in all the respective languages, of course, Alex considers himself an international citizen. Alex is the visionary behind ICBC, the International Cannabis Business Conference, and it's the first business conference in the world to happen in multiple countries. ICBC is regarded as the leading B2B cannabis industry conference series in Europe specifically. A magna cum laude graduate that majored in political science, Alex has used his knowledge of law and politics to push cannabis policy forward all over the world. Amazing. Alex, thank you so much for making time to be here on Travel Tuesday.
Dude, Ryan, thanks for having me.
Is there anything in your intro that you want to color in any further, or anything that you feel like we missed?
Oh man, just family man, avid exerciser. I'm an MC for 30 years. I love to spread the funk and love around. So I don't know, prolific or jack of all trades and master of none.
Oh yeah. Hey, I understand. Well, either way, we appreciate you being here, and I'm excited to dive in. So let's get started.
Cool.
First off, as a person who's very passionate about the cultural heritage of the cannabis movement, I was stoked to see that you and Jack Herrera had a history. What was Jack's influence with you, and how did working with Jack Herrera shape your journey in the cannabis industry?
Jack would always say it's pronounced Herrera.
Herrera.
Yep, just so.
Good. Thank you.
Well, and I think it completely. I don't think we'd be talking here right now, Brian, if it wasn't for Jack. I met him in '93 in Santa Cruz through a friend, Mikey J, Surf Dread Selassie from Santa Cruz, who was Jack's #1 signature gatherer, volunteer signature gatherer at that time. And Jack came up to Santa Cruz to meet with Mikey, who I knew, and Mikey had some of his homies come meet Jack. Mm-hmm. And when Jack and I met, we just kind of hit it off. I was fresh off the boat from Minnesota. I'm born and raised in Minneapolis. So when I got up to Santa Cruz and all the hippies and shit, I looked like a hippie, but I wasn't, right? And, I was an urban city kid. And I did have long, straight hair and shit. So I had like hippie tendencies, I guess. And I like green bud and psychedelics for sure. But because all we had was the brownberry back then. So I was like, oh my God, I love this weed. I met Jack and we hit it off right away. And I was, I was like a misfit in Minnesota. But when I come to California, I was like the leader of the misfits all of a sudden, right? Because of my work ethic, just my Minnesota work ethic. And so I was like, what needs to get done? And then pretty much immediately, Jack hired me as as the head of his Northern California signature gathering efforts for the California Hemp Initiative, which is what Jack was famous for. He was pushing legalization, before 215. And even when 215 came out, I remember being with Jack and Dennis Perron, and them kind of squabbling on Jack saying, you should do legalization. Dennis saying, no, we're going to do medical because that's where it's going. And Jack was like, but no, you should do legalization. But Jack knew he really didn't have any power because all the momentum was with Dennis and medical at that time. That was the that was the logical decision. But Jack he didn't give a shit. He was just hardcore, getting signatures every 2 years. I think it would happen 2-3 years. You qualify for initiative, you start getting signatures, and it wouldn't even come close. But we were out there on the streets, banging for Jack and his CHI, California Hemp Initiative, which was basically treat weed like wine, or even like tomatoes in some regard. It was so out there. But through Jack and through doing all that activist work, I remember we did a big event with Be Real from Cypress Hill, Chris Conrad, Jack. We did Lighthouse Point in Santa Cruz on Martin Luther King's birthday in 1994, I think it was, and then we did the Human Peace Chain. We went over a mile long. The Northridge earthquake was actually that evening in Los Angeles. So it's kind of a bug out. But through Jack, I met everyone. I met Dennis, I met Ed Rosenthal, I met Dale Geringer, I met Debbie Goldsberry. And then basically one day we went up to Dennis Peron's house, me and Mikey J, and there was a photo shoot there, but Newsweek, and the photo guy picked me, Debbie, and Dennis's young lover to be in the photo shoot. And so that was about a 4-hour photo shoot where we had to smoke joints the whole time. And it was rough. And these were back in those, it almost felt like the last vestiges of the summer of love, if I can kind of describe it, especially like from a Minnesotan. But anyway, and then Debbie hired me to be part of the Cannabis Action Network, where we did the Hemp Expo, 30,000 people in Golden Gate Park. I was working with Etienne Fontaine in Berkeley on Telegraph Avenue. He schooled me up on Haight-Ashbury, Telegraph Avenue. And then, it was me and Jeff, a dude named Jeff Jones off the boat from South Dakota. And he was just a kid sleeping on the sofa, wanting to be an activist just like me, which is and then of course he became great heights in the Oakland, reached great heights in the Oakland area with regards to cannabis activism too. So anyway, that was great. And then I moved to Europe, right? Things just kind of petered out. I knew I couldn't probably do that forever, or at least in that context. So, and I kind of got bored with America, a little bit lost in my mid-20s, and I said, well, I just moved to Europe, right?
Yeah.
It was cool because then all of a sudden Debbie got the contract to run the Cannabis Cup. A guy named Mike Esterson actually got it, 420 Tours, and he hired Debbie to run the concert house, and Debbie hired me to help her run the concert house. So I ran the front door of the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam, of the Milkveeg, the concert house, for about 5 years. So that was cool. People say, what do I do? And, people would be like, people say, what do I do? I was like, I work for the Cannabis Cup. But that was only 2 weeks out of the year. And then the other weeks out of the year, I was just going from country to country. And that's when I wasn't doing a lot of cannabis activism. I worked on a ganja farm in Switzerland. I was learning languages. I was chasing girls. And it was a great time in my life. And people used to say, Alex, you don't have any money or a job. How do you travel all around Europe? I was like, it's because I don't have any money or a job.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, Jack, I mean, it can't really be understated how much Jack influenced me and all the doors that working for him opened up for me.
Yeah. It's something. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's amazing. There's all the names and the network and how people come into this movement, which is really grounded in activism, right? This human rights movement. What role, if you had to pinpoint, it's foundational, right? To this, to the cannabis legalization movement. Do you feel, what's your take on activism today? What forms does it come in? Obviously, the era of the beatniks to Prop 215 was one era, and there was strategies that existed. Today, what are forms of activism today that exist globally that are moving the cannabis and hemp industries forward into the mainstream?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when the recession happened in 2008, the narrative of why we're going to legalize cannabis changed, right? Before, we knew we had to make it economically viable, but as activists, we came, like you had said, on a human rights, a civil liberty, civil rights level for cannabis smokers. It's just a God-given right. It's just an idiotic thing to criminalize a plant, right? So we were coming at it from that perspective. And so was like MPP and drug DPA and all the people that the two main organizations that were critical in the 90s in changing all this shit for America. But then the recession happened, and then it really kicked in, and the activists saw an opportunity to just push the economic viability of this.
Right.
And I think that's where activism is at right now. I think it's pure economics. For better or for worse, we're not talking about the human rights aspect of smoking cannabis as much as it deserves, I guess.
Right.
But I don't know if that's if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because the policy is moving forward. So whatever it takes to move, I don't really care. Whatever it takes to move the policy forward, I'm cool with it. And if you got to show people the money, and then the civil liberties are a byproduct of that, then it doesn't matter to me. We think we can only get a little bit more back to the human rights aspect of it, because we're not just talking about cannabis now, are we? Right? Cannabis is a metaphor of sorts, or of sustainability, communityism.
Right.
It's an anti-globalist plant. It's not into one world monolithic monocropping. It's into diversity. It's into free thinking. It's into food, fuel, fiber, medicine, and shelter, like Jack drilled into my brain 30 years ago. And so there's all those things that it represents. So when it talks about like being able to grow your own cannabis, to make your own clothes, to grow your own food, it represents sustainability. So I think that it does need to go back more to human rights. The whole conversation of the earth needs to go back to that, because the current narrative of what's going to save the earth is not true. Like the climate change narrative or the carbon narrative or whatever. The earth is sick. There's no doubt about it. But we don't need another system of control by the corporatocracy to change. I mean, the corporatocracy will never be the sponsors of the revolution, ever. So you can't pick and choose your battles. You got to believe in a system. We're not all going to agree on everything, but we can agree on a system. So the system is not being able to cap and trade, being the most bullshit system ever, where you get to buy these fake carbon credits and still get to the industrial complexes still get to pollute as much as they want. So I think cannabis and hemp, cannabis is the $1 billion crop, but hemp is the $1 trillion crop. Like Popular Mechanics called it the $1 billion crop 70 years ago. So now, 80 years ago. And so now we have hemp we have to turn it into a hemp economy. So I guess the activism needs to just understand, people, whether you like it or not, you're going to tap into the consciousness of cannabis, like the Michael Pollan, the botany of desire type of thing happening. Mm-hmm. And so cannabis has its own life, spirit, consciousness, and it's kind of drawing us in. So again, whatever it takes, we'll take it. But in terms of an overall goal for true global sustainability, not just a buzzword, if hemp's not part of the conversation, then it seems kind of specious.
Yeah, and going back to your point about that economic case, right? And 10.2% of the global GDP is attributed to the travel economy, and how that connects countries and cultures and craft and products. And this is part of the conversation today, is as an event producer with this history and this context, understanding those the different conversations in play that are representing the hemp conversation as well as the cannabis and this tourism and the modern day tourist and the evolution of cannabis and hemp experiences being accessible in spas and events and in lounge settings, in cafes. And it's really starting to become a major differentiating point of the traditional market, where your experience was limited to smoking weed in your living room with your friends after you bought, your sack from your dealer in his living room. And that was the extent of the experience economy. But now it's curated to where we're seeing data that the travel audience, the cannabis travel audience, has this appetite for curated flights and tastings and samplings and this vibrant, above board mainstream experience economy, from beverages to edibles to culinary. And cannabis by nature is intersecting with all that, especially events and what you've created with ICBC. So let's dig into that. What inspired you to create ICBC, the International Cannabis Business Conference? And what, if someone attended this, Alex, what could they expect to find at ICBC Berlin, for example, which is happening in April next year?
So yeah, what inspired it? Well, you know, I just saw a need for it. I saw a need for there to be an international. I just figured cannabis is going to go international. It really wasn't yet when I started the ICBC, and it was just barely going when I first came to Berlin. But I just had a vision, you know. I went to prison for cannabis in Germany, and when I got out of prison, I wanted to kind of get my shit together. Not what I did was morally reprehensible in any way, but it was, you know, I say my sister went to Princeton and I went to prison, so it's like I could have been doing something else more productive with my life, and that's not to slight any dealer. That's just my experience personally. It wasn't a good thing. So I got my shit together, and then I started a very popular medical marijuana clinic on the West Coast. And people started asking me a lot of questions. I said I'd been an event producer I did a lot of hip hop shows back in the day and parties, and I thought I'd marry the two. And so I decided to do the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference, which became the biggest in the state of Oregon. And then I said, all right, let's go. Like by 2014, 2015, I was like, all right, let's do the International Cannabis Business Conference. And I wanted to go back to Germany and legalize weed. I literally said to myself, I'm not going to break the law, any laws I don't like. I'm just going to work to change those laws.
Right.
And that's what I did. And I went back to Berlin. I started the ICBC Berlin in 2017. It became the biggest ICBC ever of any of our locations by far. It blew up. It's actually currently blowing up. And it became the meeting point for the Eastern Hemisphere for cannabis, and a lot of the Western Hemisphere too joins us. Right. So we have about 5,000 people from 80 different countries, and it's by far the biggest B2B event in the Eastern Hemisphere and trade show. So what people can expect to be the creme de la creme of the international cannabis business community, an industry at the ICBC, and all the C-suites, all the distributors, suppliers, wholesalers, verticals, MSOs, all that, and hemp, cannabis, CBD, all that. And it's a one-stop shop where people can get all their meetings done. It's kind of like a little MJ Biz, right? It's the baby MJ Biz of Europe. Yep. And it's a soup to nuts event, although this year, of course, next year, we are focusing heavily on the medical marijuana market in Germany, because that is the market that is driving the industry right now for a few different reasons.
Yeah.
And that actually ties in with tourism somewhat, in that foreigners can get their prescription, right? So Germany has a de facto legalization system now. So now folks who come to the ICBC will be able to get cannabis by getting their prescription and having it supplied through a pharmacy, which might sound like a cumbersome or clinical process, but indeed right now in Germany, it's not. It is about as easy as pie. It's easier than getting your medical card and cannabis than the California or Oregon back in the day.
Wow.
So that's how easy it is.
Wow. Are you going to have that set up at ICBC as part of the experience, where you can get your physician's recommendation or whatever?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, actually. I talked to my lawyers. They're advising me against it, not because it's criminally nefarious in any way, but because, or that it could maybe in some way be construed, because there's no advertising. So we have to really do it correctly, because it's really important to me to follow the letter of the law. But I think it'd be really, really cool. But they think it just, my lawyers are like, oh, it's bad optics for such a professional conference like you. But we have a smokers lounge, a consumption lounge this year. Okay. So you know, I'm going to try to make it work. I'm just trying to find the right path. So I feel very comfortable, and it's done in a very, you know, high-end manner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this year, I think, you know, to drill down on the tourism side of it, is there going to be like a travel and tourism programming this year to really speak to that, not just from an ICBC event economic impact lens, but also having content and a program around what is the opportunity for medical travel and tourism related to cannabis.
Yeah, that's you, Brian.
Yeah. So just putting a plug in for those interested, we're adding that program this year, and we're really excited. We have some great speakers and panelists joining, and we're going to start unpacking that for the European edition. So
It's going to be awesome.
Hey, Alex, let's talk about culture for a second. How has living in different countries, you think, influenced your approach to building ICBC? Can you point to any specific model elements of what you've built and that influence specifically?
Sure. I mean, you know, it's hard for most Yankees to do business in Europe.
Yeah.
You know, they can do it especially if it's not coming in with a load ton of money, right? So, you know, I probably spent, I don't know, 12 years of my life in Europe, my adult life. And I lived in Holland and Switzerland and Germany and France. And of course, I live in Slovenia now. And I'm very Euro savvy.
Right.
So, and it's not just because I speak I speak all the languages a little bit. I can communicate. That's why I say communicating, because speaking, I'm not fluent in any of the languages, but I definitely can communicate in all of them for sure. And but just to understand culture, European culture, to understand American culture, to understand the comparison and contrast of those cultures, then to understand different countries' culture within Europe, between how France is different than Germany, and Germany is different than Switzerland, Switzerland is different than Slovenia, Slovenia is different than Holland, and Holland is different than Italy. And so to understand some of these differences, I'm basically, you know, a social scientist, so I find all this shit heavily fascinating, all this cultural stuff heavily fascinating. So I care and I soak it all up. So I was able early to understand the nuances of these respective cultures, and because I understood the nuances of the culture, then it helped me do business. It helped me, you know, I never felt once, I mean, I felt sometimes they're like, who's this Yankee rocking shit in Europe or whatever, maybe feel a little hater vibes or whatever, but when it was down for doing business, I never felt once that, oh, I'm at a disadvantage because I'm an American, because like you said in the nice intro you gave me, I am born and raised in Minneapolis, I'll always be, but I am an international citizen. So I'm able to connect with these folks on their level and not foist my demonstrative American cowboy culture on them. Only when necessary. I do a little bit when necessary, you know, but I do it in a very apropos way.
Yeah. Well, ICBC brings a lot of economic impact to the city of Berlin and other destinations throughout Europe. So if there's a destination watching this, what advice would you give them in order to attract conferences like yours? What should they be thinking? How can they incentivize producers like you to come choose them so they enjoy the economic impact and they become an ICBC destination?
Well, I mean, that all has to do with, I think, the laws, right? And I think we saw that in America, with each state would have their conference, and then when the law came on, the conference would come on. So, I mean, for people to attract people like, you know, I have people headhunting me for my venues, headhunting me for my business all the time, right? Now I don't actually for Berlin, because there's only two there's only two venues that could house us in the entire city, right?
Right.
So they're so big, but yeah, you know, you just have to, you know, and I don't, they, sometimes we'll get a little bit of kickback from the chamber of or like for hotel rooms or whatever. I should be better at going to the city and being like, look, I'm bringing $10 million of revenue into your city. Let me get some little social bullshit, but because I'm a crazy libertarian psychopath ADD'd out motherfucker, I don't do that.
Well, I think that's room for growth, man. It's like, so working in the tourism industry for destinations specific to cannabis and hemp, you see their tools and data and how they measure things. And they do have these event impact calculators that it's a systematized, how many heads and beds, what's the tax revenue, how many people landed, flew in versus drove. I mean, and when you start understanding those data sets, what it becomes is a language to communicate with the tourism industry and the destination.
Yeah. I love it. You can extrapolate from that number, actual data, that you can be like, hey, because I can only assume I'm bringing in about 10 million bucks, and that would be residually also, I guess you could say, or whatever, or not. I guess if someone stays a week, they spend $5,000 in that week, then some of that's direct during the conference, and I guess some of that be residual. So I must be, it's a load ton of money. I probably, when I think about it, we probably bring in more money than almost any event in Europe, cannabis event in Europe.
Yeah. And I mean, I believe for B2B events like ICBC, as well as B2C events like the Emerald Cup that happened in Oakland, and they work pretty closely with Visit Oakland, and there was a strategy there, that there is an opportunity for cannabis event producers, whether it's B2B or B2C, to mature into kind of this next level of collaboration with the cities that are welcoming them with open arms and creating an environment where the event can thrive and be. And
I think that's our next conversation, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely.
You give me some of that social money for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's great partnerships to be had and strategies to unfold. How do you see cannabis conferences, speaking of evolving, how do you see cannabis conferences evolving as the industry matures? Let's say ICBC specifically.
Well, no, I can tell you for what I think for sure. I mean, the natural evolution is consolidation, right? Because a legal market goes conference fucking crazy. Everyone goes to the conferences, and then only a few survive because everyone gets sick of too many conferences and they can't choose. So consolidation happens. So you'll always have a few big ones in Europe, like Cannabis, ICBC. But they'll specialize. I just started my new private investment club, the Tallman House, and now we're doing small private events that are niche, right, for investment. So you're gonna see, if you're not going to be being able to be one of the big kids on the block, which only very few are able to do that, then you always have the opportunity. It's like this. You can't sell you're never going to be the biggest commercial grower, but you can grow some high-end super dank that you can hot buck, get good money for, and find your niche there, or create a brand or whatever. But in the same thing for conferences, it's all about the niche. The niche conference as the market matures. Those types of things are needed.
Yeah. I mean, in these conferences, a big part of it is fostering and creating environments to make really strong connections. All right. That's a high value for attendees. When it comes to the ICBC, let's just say Berlin in this instance, programming, how do you make sure that how do attendees foster those connections and create those strong connections at
ICBC? We're getting better at that. So we're doing a lot of things this year that are new additions to foster connections and relationships. We're actually giving tickets out to all cannabis pharmacies, which are basically just de facto dispensaries in Germany. That's a slight digression. But what we're doing is we're putting lounges and bars within the expo area this year. We're getting an app that is a stellar app for people to connect. We're doing a speed dating thing where we have 20 tables in the expo area, just vis-a-vis two people, and you sign up for your speed dating to meet who you want to meet, and then you go
Nice.
get assigned to a table, sit down and talk. So we've never done that before, and we're really excited and think that that's going to be a big hit, and that those tables are going to be packed all day with the speed date meetings.
That's awesome. I see that happen at travel industry conferences a lot, right? That's one of those tactics or programs.
Yeah, so I'm doing that type of shit where I'm just like, okay, I'm not just an activist or a social scientist or a rapper. I got the biggest conference in business trade show in Europe, and I got to figure out how to make really a wonderful experience for people. And we have the consumption lounge. I think that's an awesome thing. It's all contained within the conference area.
Yeah.
So bars and consumption lounges and speed dating and the apps. It's booming.
Yeah, and the tourism and travel program that's being added.
Don't forget the tourism town.
Yeah, man. So 2 more questions. What excites you most about the future of cannabis and ICBC across multiple destinations, and the role of ICBC in that future of cannabis?
Well, besides me eventually making a whole bunch of money, dude, I like feeling like I made a difference, right? I like feeling that I'm not insignificant. I like feeling that the energy I put out there can make a difference. So what excites me most is that I wanted to come to Germany to legalize cannabis. I started the biggest B2B event. I connected the whole industry, the most important business conference in the country and on the continent. And lo and behold, everything I said and thought came true. So how much was I or ICBC involved in the expediting Germany's illegal? I don't know, but I believe it's something. And so to know that I can wield that power is awesome, because most people who wield power are just a bunch of sociopaths. And so if I can wield some power,
Right.
then it's amazing. And we just push against the beast, the devil, and do Jah's work.
I mean, it's not just Berlin. What are some of the other destinations ICBC has a presence in at this point?
So Berlin is taking up all the oxygen in the room. It's a massive event. It's scaling. It's my baby. But we actually do an event with Cannabis. The day before Cannabis, we're partnered with them. It's a separate event, and we do the B2B aspect of the Europe's biggest consumer event, Cannabis. And then there's Slovenia, which I am personally highly vested in, and I'm doing Jah's work here in Slovenia. Right. And the work I'm doing here is making a difference, and there's some big news to come out of Slovenia soon.
Awesome.
And very, very, very exciting. So in terms of the business aspect, I find my businesses that I do, I'm very non-plant touching. I like bringing people together. I like doing events. I have my little niche. But yeah, it doesn't interest me so much, which might be ironic, right? What interests me is the movement of the people the most.
Right. Amazing work, Alex. Really cool. So where can the people watching learn more about you, your work, ICBC, get tickets, book flights? Where can people find you?
Yeah, just Google. It's internationalcbc.com. You can just Google me and the word cannabis, or ICBC and the word cannabis, or German cannabis event, and we're right there on the top of Google. And tickets are still pretty reasonable up until the end of January. And then the Barcelona event's March 13th, and then the big Berlin event is March 29th and 30th, or excuse me, April 29th and 30th. And April 28th, we have our private investment event at the Hotel Adlon in Berlin. So anybody that is interested at all in international cannabis, in the European market, into the German market, what's happening there can't be understated. Then they want to come to the ICBC. And we have, again, a lot of the programming is insane. And we have a bunch of great add-ons like your program this year also, Brian.
Yeah, really excited for that. Really excited to be working with you on that. And we invite everybody watching to know that there is a dedicated travel program at ICBC Berlin in April. So come join us, grab a ticket, be part of the conversation. Myself and also Beard Bros will be there too, I believe.
Beard Bros will be there too. Yeah, and if they get and then you have 25% discount link. So anybody can hit you or Bearded Bros up for the 25% ticket discount link.
Yeah. Alex, thanks again for making time. Really appreciate it. This is Travel Tuesday, brought to you by Beard Bros Media Network at the intersection of culture and industry. I'm your host, Brian Applegarth. Thank you for being with us today. We'll see you next month for another episode of Travel Tuesday. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks, Brian.